Hey, it's Biddy Penny. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a beginning to end journal making video for you. So I made a really fun journal for myself, and I made one for my niece just before Christmas. And this is the paper pad that I used. I picked it up at Michael's. It was a hot buy for $5, and I just loved the tiger image and all these different pattern, really graphic papers. I just thought they were really great. So I'm actually going to use that zebra for the cover of my journal. Now, I have shown this journal in a live, and to be honest, my videos might come out in a different order, but I've also recorded 3 other videos that show you how I made all the inside painted papers. So but this is how I put them all together and made a journal for myself. So right now I'm just going through the paper pad and selecting the pages that I want. Now I am only needing, I think I picked 5 or 6 pages in all, because I'm going to be making pocket pages with this paper. That's kind of the only, and then I'm making my cover with it. That's all I'm doing with this paper pad for my journal. So I'm just picking out the pages that I'd want for my pockets. That's what it is, Bloomin' Wild. And first of all, I'm going to fussy cut out this zebra. The zebra was just so fabulous. It's gold foiled, and it just so happened to be the perfect size for my front and back cover of the journal I'm making. The journal I'm making is just kind of a wild and free journal for me. I'm including mixed media paper so that I can paint and have fun. It's definitely is like a sketchbook and a journal, or an art journal, however you want to think of it. But yeah, so I pulled out 6 pages. So my journal is going to have 3 signatures. I want folding pockets or pocket pages at the beginning of each signature. So I pulled out 6 sheets of paper so that I can make those. Now I'm cutting my 12 by 12 down to 12 by 11 right now. The 11-inch side needs to be so that my paper is upright, because all of my pages in this journal are going to be 8.5 by 11 folded in half. So I want to make sure those tigers are upright. So when I cut off the 8.5, this is the scraps that I'm getting. I want to keep those because those are the pockets to my pages. Now I'm bringing in this other page. I'm going to cut it down to an 11. And I'm just kind of eyeballing things. I needed to measure this so I know how big to cut this next piece, because what this is just going to line the insides of my pockets. That way it's just not white. So I decided to cut these at 5.5, I believe. 5.5 or 6, either one would work. So it would be 5.5 by 11 or 6 by 11. It just depends on how much paper you want to use. But that's how I cut all of these pieces down. And then now I'm going to assemble my pockets. So I'm going to fold the pages in half, just exactly how they're going to be bound in my book. Some of them I fold so that the pattern is on the inside. Some of them I fold so the pattern's on the outside. And that's fine with me. I think it makes it more interesting. That new trimmer of mine, it's not exactly straight. I don't know if it's user error or if it's trimmer error yet. It's too early to tell. Okay, so this is that 5.5 by 6, or sorry, 5.5 by 11 piece. And I'm just going to adhere this straight down. So I'm just going to put glue all over this. And again, this is just to cover the white of the pages. If you didn't want to use this much patterned paper, you could also stencil on it, paint on it. You could cover it with book pages. You wouldn't have to use patterned paper, but I wanted to. I definitely wanted to. So I'm just trying to get it straight here. Right at the top edge. And now I'll be able to make sure my corners are good. Now I'll be able to add my pocket after I trim some off. I just thought this paper was super fun, and I just wanted a really fun journal just for complete random sketches and ideas and painting time and just fun. I just wanted fun. So this journal definitely delivered on that. I'm gluing these strips down to just 3 sides so that they are my pocket, and see how that patterned paper makes a nice background. Since if the paper was double-sided, also I must mention, then you wouldn't need to cut out that back piece unless you didn't like the pattern on one of the sides. If it was double-sided, I would have just added my pockets. I would have only needed 3 sheets of cardstock because the pocket is made with the excess once I cut mine down to 8.5 by 11. So yeah, but because it's white, I'm needing to cover the insides. Okay, so now I have my 3 pocket pages ready, and again, these are going to be the beginning of my signatures. So I gathered the pages that I wanted to use. I'm going to use my mixed media paper from Blick. I love this stuff. And then now I'm just going to start building my signatures. I have this hymnal paper that I glued together. I have painted pages. Again, I'll have tutorials on this. I have my 6x6 pages that I've turned into journaling pages, 8.5 by 11. I have a tutorial for that coming out. And I have these calligraphy pages they're like the last few pages of a book that my children didn't use. So I love it even more that it came from their school books. You know, at the end of the year, they send them home with their books, and the unfinished pages I just harvested for the craft room. All right, so I'm just kind of flipping through here, making sure I have a good feel for it, that I like the way it's going, and I do. Now, what I'm doing here is really building one signature, but of course this is going to be way too thick and way too big. But I'm just getting a general idea, making sure I have enough pages to have the variety that I wanted. Actually, next time I make one of these, I'm going to add a lot more of my mixed media paper because I've been wanting to paint so much. And I'm going to do 2 sheets for every 1 sheet of patterned paper. But yeah, see, that signature is just way too thick. So no big deal. I kind of already have it exactly the way I wanted it. So it's just a little shuffle here and there. And then I'll have my 3 signatures all in place and ready to go in the journal. I think I just end up adding this one for the center there, and we're good. All right, so now I'm going to show you guys, I believe I'm going to show you guys how I made the cover next. Okay, so my husband gets me edible arrangements on special occasions sometimes. I absolutely love it. The fruit, really just the fresh fruit, which we eat daily, but still, it's in an arrangement, and some of it's dipped in chocolate. I love it. I don't like white chocolate very much, unless it's on a pretzel. I don't care for it. But I like the milk chocolate on the fruit. It's the bomb. I always tell him, don't buy me flowers, buy me an edible arrangement. Anyways, so this is a huge bag from them, and I saved it because I was like, God, that's such thick, nice paper. Like, this is a very nice, high quality bag. And I had been wanting to make a junk journal cover from a bag, a gift bag. So I saved this one, kept it in the craft room. Now I'm finally using it. Now, I've never made a journal cover like this before, but I've really been wanting soft color covers for my journals instead of hard covers. I like them both. It's just I haven't really explored the soft cover options. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of just cutting and chopping this thing down. This is big enough once it's flattened to make 2 large journals like I'm making here today and 2 small journals. That's how big this bag is. Okay, so I'm kind of inspecting my bag, and in the bottom of the bag there was this cardboard reinforcement, and so I decided to keep it. It didn't have any kind of like food stains or anything like that. Like, I wouldn't keep it if it had fruit juice on it, obviously, but because it was very clean and like new, then I used it. So I didn't even have to cut it down. It just ended up being perfect. And so I lined that underneath here, underneath this flap of this bag, just to reinforce it a little bit more. I wouldn't necessarily call this a soft cover book at the end of the day. It's actually still very rigid and like a hard cover, but it works for me. Okay, because I knew I was working in a new territory and I had a lot of pages. You'll notice this is a 12 by 12 sheet of paper I'm laying in here. It's just one of my favorites, so I try to use some of my favorites in this journal, and I love this sheet from Maggie Holmes. But this is 12 by 12, so you can tell this bag is actually more like 9 by 13, or sorry, I think it's 8.5 by 13. And I left all that excess on the edges because I don't know how much space I'm going to need for the spine, and I've never made a book like this before. Obviously, just one fold down the middle of the spine wouldn't be enough for 3 signatures, right? I'm going to put one signature, my center signature, right there in that crease that I'm folding right now. But I've got to sew in 2 other signatures, one on each side of it. So I know I will need some space to make that happen. And that's why I left so much. Like, our paper is only 8.5 by 11, right? So I've got an extra 2 inches, one on each side, to accommodate for this. Now, obviously, I just keep trying to have to work with this, and there is a lot of that in the making of this journal. A lot of me working with the spine in different ways to make this happen. So honestly, now obviously this was my first time making this, but honestly, building a hardcover journal I think is much easier. Especially if you're using an old book and sewing it straight into the spine and you're not detaching the covers or anything. It's a lot easier than this. But there's no way to know unless you're exploring and trying, right? So this is the cover of the journal, and I'm just laying down a couple of random pieces of cardstock. And then I bring in my zebra. And I had toyed with having the zebra on top of the fabric book tape that I put on this, but I decided to keep the zebra under it. I have this really nice, new to me fabric book tape, and I used it on this journal, which also added another layer of thickness to it. I mean, it's a really stiff, sturdy journal, you guys, by the time I have all of my layers on here. So this is my front and back cover, and here is the white book tape. And this is made specifically for bookbinding and book repair. When I was in middle school, I was the librarian's assistant, and I used to repair all the books that needed repaired before they could be checked out again. She taught me all the skills of doing that, and I loved working in the library with her. I loved working on books and taking something that was falling apart and rebuilding it was a lot of fun for me. So it's no surprise that I make junk journals now. Okay, I got this crooked the way I applied it. I should have cut it instead of trying to roll it and lay it out at the same time. I did mention that that was in middle school, right? So now I'm peeling this back up. I'm not going to stress about it. This is my journal. It's my fun journal, so I can't stress about it. I'm just laying this back out straight now and putting it down. Now, the spine of this is so stiff. Like, as slow as you see me folding it is because it was that stiff. The stuff is just mega strong. Okay, so I'm going to do a pamphlet stitch for my pages. I'm bringing in some paper clips to hold them together so they don't shift too much when I start this process. Now you'll notice I still have all the excess edges on this book cover, and that's really important because this is just the beginning of me sewing it in and working the spine. Okay, so this is a waxed cord for books, and you cut it 2 lengths of your spine. So lay it out the length of your spine, add another length, and that should be enough to do a pamphlet stitch. A pamphlet stitch has typically 3 holes. It can have 5 or more. But the 3-hole pamphlet stitch is kind of like the most widely used and popular one. I'm not using a grid. I'm not making sure this is perfectly measured out because I'm not worried about it. But I did secure my pages in there, holding them and clipped in. And that way I poked the holes through my spine and through my paper at the same time. One thing I've discovered, for the most part, when you're trying to line your holes back up to run your fabric through, if you have your book folded together the way it was when you poked the holes through, it'll be much easier to get your thread through. So down here, I think I'll show y'all what I'm talking about down here. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. I'm going to run it down like this, the full length of the spine on the outside. Okay, so if I fold my book together, it'll make it so much easier to get it through your pages. Sometimes that can be a little tricky. Okay, and I had started this on the outside, so that's where my string is. Now I'm going to run it back through the center here. You should probably check out Nick the Booksmith or someone like that to get like a real great tutorial on the pamphlet stitch. That's really not what I'm doing here, but I am giving you an idea, an introduction. This is my favorite way to stitch signatures into books. You know, you keep playing with it. You want to make sure it's pretty tight. You don't want your signatures shifting a lot. And right now what I'm doing is just evening out my string and making sure it's centered, everything's centered. I'm making sure those loops on the inside are nice and tight. And the main thing is you want that string down the middle. You want your ends to be on each side of that string, so that when you tie your knot, you're tying it over the string, and these knots won't pull through because that string is the centerpiece. Okay, so that's like one of the biggest takeaways from a pamphlet stitch. Nice and tight. You don't want to pull it so tight that you tear your pages, but you do want it nice and tight where the signature's not shifting up and down, and you want your ends on the outside of that center string. All right, right here I'm having to start working the spine of the journal. I have to do this so that I have a place for our next signature. So I'm rounding it, I'm using my bone folder, my hands, and I'm giving it a curvature and creasing it, putting my paper clips in, and this way I have a place to put this next signature. Because before it was just folded in half, you know, had a flatness to it. So here's me using the bone folder, really giving it a crease, really adding that curvature so that my signature one lines up with the center one very well, right? Like I don't want it overhanging that signature one, that center one a lot. And this is going to be building really the shape of my journal. This is because this journal is so stiff. This really is not a soft cover at the end of the day. So I have to keep working it. I think it would be much different if I was working with fabric. But it's fun, it's exploratory, and it worked out in the end. I wouldn't say that this is a beginner version of a junk journal to try. I wouldn't recommend that. If you were trying this as a beginner, I'd keep it to like one signature, and I probably wouldn't put that reinforced cardboard in there. I would just make it with the gift bag, and you will have much more success. But if you're more comfortable with junk journaling or book binding, then I think you could give this one a go. If you want something in between a hardcover and a soft cover. So again, I'm just kind of lining my holes up. Obviously, when you have 3 signatures, you can get really precise with your holes. You can create a pattern for them so that they're all like separated perfectly and measured perfectly. Again, that's not the vibe of this journal, and that's not the vibe of how I create. It depends on what I'm creating for. I made my niece a journal for her first year after being wed. It was a wedding gift. And with that one, I wanted to be extra precise. Okay, now that I have everything sewn in, I have the curvature of my spine created. Now I can go in and trim off the excess of the cover. I use my magic mats a lot more for this kind of purpose these days than I do for my die cutting machines. So if you have some magic mats sitting around, this is a great use for them. Here is my journal and how I'm using it. I actually have a few pages completed in it. I'm going to show you guys. I love that little things have big magic. I put some of my favorite paper scraps in here. This is a spread I made while journaling live with Junie Desiree. And this was a spread I did for gift wrapping when me and my hubby gift wrapped for Christmas. I have some journaling pages in here, writing down my thoughts. This is a fun button page that I painted. It was just for fun. Same thing here, just a funny mermaid and octopus storm. It's just a fun journal. There's no rules. It's all good times. I've put a prayer for strength in here. Just anything goes. I really love how this journal turned out. I'm excited to use it this year. It'll be a fun little art sketchbook and journal for me to have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and that you'll check out the other videos I release on how to make the pages, because definitely there's some new ideas there that you might not have seen before. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.